Hey there, guys. Welcome to the Holy Shed. I hope that you're well and that you're having a great day here in London. It has been amazing today, wall to wall sunshine, and I think most places, but certainly London just comes alive when the sunshine is out. And it's been great. We had an amazing weekend, actually, a fabulous weekend with two great pals of ours, Ruth and John from Devon, Shedsters all the way, and among other things, many other things actually, we went to see the musical, The Book of Mormon. Now, me and Pat went to see this, I don't know, some years ago, probably when it first came out, and I remember loving it. But I think I'd forgotten quite how outrageous it is, but also how profound. It's poking fun, not just at Latter day Saints, though that's the subject matter. I think it's having a go at all forms of religion that become pompous and self satisfied. And like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, the place was packed out. We howled and howled, and then went for a nice, relaxing meal in Chinatown. We know how to live. It's a great day. Now, last time here in the shed, I began telling you some of my tales, relating my improbable journey from a house church apostle to a Church of England priest, leading a church in a pub along the way, and serving the Bishop of London as his chaplain for the environment. But it's not the outward details of the story, the circumstances that got me from here to here, which matter. They're just the tip of an iceberg. The real journey is the inner passage, the spiritual quest, and in my instance, how I traversed the spiritual and theological terrain in switching to become an Anglican vicar without losing my sanity. Now, this is what I'll be talking about and exploring in the next few sheds in various ways. So I want to begin today by talking about the whole institution thing, and that huge basic shift from a nonconformist style of churchmanship to being part of the Church of England, the established church. Knowing me as you do, I need hardly stress how much I struggle with the institution of the institutional church. I mentioned last time how my track toward ordination began with the Bishop of London predicting that I would find the Church of England very frustrating and that I would be critical of many things, but, he said, the church would benefit from my criticism, which was an incredibly generous thing to say and typical of the generous spirit of the man. I don't know if you've read the endorsement of that he gave to How to Be a Bad Christian at the beginning of the book, but he said something like this. He said, "I do hope that a commendation from his bishop will not put people off reading a book so rich in humanity and written by someone who is a convincing and compassionate pastor, but probably not a very good member of the Deanery Synod." I love him, I do. And of course he was right. I never was a good member of the Deanery Synod. And I do indeed find the Church of England very frustrating. But in fairness, it has also provided a home for my ministry and an amazing platform into many lives within and outside of the church, which I otherwise would not have had. And let's face it, my frustration with church and churchy things did not begin with the Church of England. Oh no, that goes way back into my evangelical and house church past, when I discovered how coercively conformist, nonconformist Christianity can actually be. The institution may be shunned in those circles, but nonconformist Christianity develops its own very rigid traditions and institutions, all on its own. Every week I get messages from people who've been hurt and damaged by rigid, often hypocritical attitudes, beliefs and practices in so-called nonconformist and evangelical churches. As I've mentioned, the house church movement was led exclusively by men. Churches were governed by bodies of elders, all male, apostles and pastors, and the main leaders, all men. There were no female authority figures, despite an abundance of, I would say, overqualified, talented women. They were allowed their ministries, of course, God bless them, but never in what were deemed authoritative positions or roles. Now, this inherently misogynist, and let's call it what it is, this inherent misogyny was justified, and still is in many circles, with references to St. Paul's assertion in Corinthians of male headship, which most sensible commentators see as a reflection of his patriarchal culture, which was maybe significant at the time but has no ongoing relevance any more than the parallel exhortation for slaves to obey their masters. You know, two things go together, but it's funny how it's the kind of women submitting to their husbands and to menfolk in the church, which seems to be the one that people are so fond of quoting. Not, I've got a slave. How should I treat him or her when they're not being obedient? And yet, theologized and systematized prejudice and misogyny is still preached in many churches today, even though, as I say, preaching in support of slavery is nowhere to be found. Funny that. Many women are oppressed in churches by ridiculous, archaic ideas and basically by male prejudice. I remember a young woman telling me one time at a conference where I was speaking that her pastor had cast out of her a spirit of feminism, which he said, and he's an authority on it obviously, she had picked up at university while studying a godless subject like sociology. So I told her, just hang on a minute, I'll see if I can get it back into you. I think I did, actually. Now, there is a well-established pattern in church history of new movements arising and conflicting with institutions, and then breaking away and ultimately creating their own, often even more stringent institutions. This is basic sociology, really. It is the way of the world in most fields in life. The ironic thing is that well-established institutions, in practice, are often more flexible and less conformist than newer ones, despite perhaps having, on paper, hierarchical structures. Bishop Richard once told me, I'm the Bishop of London, Dave, but I can't really make anyone do anything, which may have been an overstatement, but I'm sure he was right. And I'm also sure that he didn't wish to make any people do things. As I mentioned last time, a huge attraction of the Church of England for me was its comprehensive nature. It's existed for ages as a finely balanced coalition of different factions and different traditions. For the past couple of 100 years or so, there has been a balance or a tension between elements of Anglo-Catholicism, evangelicalism, and what's often called broad church or liberalism. And as well as these things, there are those people who are dedicated wholeheartedly to maintaining the 1662 prayer book tradition. And also, there's what's often called central churchmanship, which focuses on taking a middle way, not being extreme over here or over there or anywhere else. It's what you could call a big tent approach to church and to Christianity. And I find that very appealing, a coalition that, yes, involves bickering and jostling and arguing, but still managing to maintain a decent level of mutual respect. That's what attracted me. Sadly, over the, 25, 30 years of my involvement with the Church of England, I have watched that coalition breaking down and unravelling and being replaced in many quarters by a dogged sectarianism that I dislike intensely. Two things drew me to the Church of England. First, this breadth or comprehensiveness that allowed vastly different theological and ecclesiological positions to dwell together in relative peace. But secondly, what drew me was the inclusiveness of a parish system which assumes that everyone within a given geographical parish is part of that church unless they opt out. And I love the fact, that neighbours who may never appear in church can nevertheless see the church as theirs, somewhere to bring children to be blessed and received into the church family, somewhere to make solemn marriage vows before God and before friends and family, somewhere to weep and bid farewell to beloved ones, somewhere to have parties and gigs, a church of the community for the community. I like that very much. I remember a woman in North London whose daughter had committed suicide. Well, she'd taken an overdose and lots of complications and problems. And I went to see her mother to arrange the funeral. And she said, I want the funeral in the church, Dave. Lots of people just have a funeral in the crematorium or the cemetery. But she said, I want it in the church, Dave. I want it in my church. I want to bring her home to my church. Now, a cynic may say, and when were you last in church, my dear? But I didn't even think that, because my heart just swelled at the thought that this person who didn't darken the door of the church nevertheless had some connection with it, felt in some way that it was a home church to bring her daughter to. I mean, that is such an amazing state of affairs. Cynics, as I say, will laugh at that, but I think it's something very precious and something to work with in terms of our connection with people outside of the church. So on both of these fronts, the issue of comprehensiveness and the issue of inclusiveness, what I see is a diminishing of those things and a shift toward a narrow biblicism, toward church as a club for the faithful, instead of this generous parish community. It's a shift toward a mean doctrinal purity instead of abounding grace, which I think is what the gospel and what the church should be about. I believe our world needs this. I believe our world needs a kinder form of Christianity, a kinder form of theology, a more inclusive ecclesiology, a more worldly spirituality that recognizes and celebrates God in people's lives already, that recognizes and celebrates God in all things, in all peoples. What I'm saying really is, I believe in grown-up church, where differences of vision, theology, and practice can be respected without any sense of threat and without the one having to engulf and swallow up the other. It's not so much the institution, which actually can be quite benign in my experience. It's not the institution that bothers me. It's the presence of an increasingly aggressive, non-conformist form of religion, which actually requires deep conformity to what it holds to be real or authentic Christianity. I mean, that's what really bothers me. Far more than, as I say, a fairly benign institution. I mean, look, I have no desire whatsoever to impose my theology or practice on anyone else. I'm not inclined, for example, to coerce people into blessing or conducting same-sex unions if that offends their conscience. Of course not. That wouldn't be very much fun for anybody, would it? I just don't want people hoisting their theologies and their practices on me. I want to be free to conduct, in this instance, same-sex marriages, when that's what my conscience requires of me. So this is what I call grown-up religion. Multiple integrities, living side by side, honouring difference, which I see actually as the soul of the Church of England, but which is being squeezed out by what I see as mean-heartedness. I have a natural aversion to all forms of fundamentalism. I don't know if it's a personality thing, or a spiritual thing, an emotional thing, historic. It's all of these things, I think. But I have an aversion to all kinds of fundamentalisms. Uh, I'm basically an instinctive progressive, a born rethinker of things. I'm constantly rethinking my own position, my own thoughts, my own approach. And I don't particularly see this as virtuous. In fact, sometimes it's an affliction. Basically, I see it as mere Christianity. I think this is what Christianity, because I think it's what Jesus Christ is and was all about. I find myself suspicious of anyone or any group that imagines or behaves as if they and they alone have the truth. I can't be doing with it. I cherish breadth, or rather, I cherish the intellectual and emotional climate in which breadth can breathe and flourish. I believe in big tent religion, big enough to live in respectfully with those of different beliefs and integrities, but also big enough for me to be able to hold my views and practice the faith that I believe in good conscience. So, yeah, I repeat and underline, I see this as grown up religion for a world come of age. I mean, it's not that I don't understand. I do understand Christian fundamentalism. I grew up in it. Um, I get where it's coming from. But I also know from experience that it's rooted in fear of difference, fear of wandering from some prescribed orthodoxy or revelation of truth, fear of missing the way, fear of judgment, ultimately of hellfire. It's about fear, basically, and trying to get a grip and hold everything together in this pure and perfect state. But all it does is hem people in, hold them in bondage, place judgment and guilt upon people. Um, to me, it's not the gospel at all. It's not the good news of Jesus Christ who came to bring us life and life in abundance. And having lived through fundamentalism, as I say, I now have this near visceral antipathy toward it, toward that in any form, including, by the way, a liberal or even a holy shed fundamentalism, should that arise. Um, I believe that it's possible to hold passionately to one's beliefs and convictions whilst also respecting the beliefs and convictions of others, or at least respecting the space in which they can have those convictions, which I may passionately disagree with. But I do think it's important that we, argue and stand as passionately as we do for our own beliefs, that we stand passionately for the right of other people to have opinions which are different and may be quite dislikable to us in many ways. And this breadth and openness, I think, applies to our relationship with people of other faiths too. So I have a foot in two camps, really. I have a foot in the mainstream church because it reminds me that no one's pure. And if I'm looking for a pure church, I'll never find it. That no one's pure, including me. And it reminds me, because I meet them, that there are tons of good people in the church who see things differently to me. But I also have a foot in the novel and the experimental camp. I have a foot in new forms of church community, in attempts to make faith more widely accessible and relevant to the world of the 21st century, to people who will never walk through the doors of a conventional church, but I think may be deeply open to what the essence of the gospel is really about. I think, if we rely solely on the given models of church, the whole thing will die in a generation or two. Or at least it will become even more deeply ghettoized and sectarian than it is now. God has to be bigger than all of this. I'm sad that the things that I find attractive about the Church of England are now under threat. I mean, look, I've got no truck with an established church. I would vote for disestablishment tomorrow if that came up. But I still hold to the vision of a church for everyone, you know. And in that sense, I like the idea of a Church of England, a church which exists in every community for everyone, a church of the community, for the community, in the community. And I don't think it's only people in the Church of England who can express that. Of course, I don't. I think that can be expressed in 1,000 different ways. But to me, that is the soul of the Church of England, about a church of the community, for the community, in the community. And I will pursue that for as long as I can within the mainstream church. But I will also pursue with all my heart expressions of church in new and different forms. I will pursue doing church outside of the church, if you like, because I'm completely sure that in the long run, that is where the future lies. So that's how I see this whole institutional thing. In itself, it's a pile of dross, but I think that there's a vessel still in mainstream church that has the possibility of still being a vehicle of goodness and godness in the world. But I repeat, I think we need to put our eggs in more than that basket. I think we also need a myriad different forms of church that are outside of those four walls and which are much more connected to and relevant to the lives and needs of people today who are just never going to walk into it. I mean, there are people I know who think, oh yeah, it may be that the churches are emptying and the statistics are all going kind of down for the church, or more or less so. But something's going to happen. Revival's going to come. The Holy Spirit will do something. Listen, it's a pipe dream. I think that people are not going to suddenly wake up one morning and say, we must go to church, we must go. I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't think that means that people are not open to God or to the essence of what Jesus Christ is about. I just think we have to find completely different ways of connecting with people and of allowing their experiences to become part of our experience too. I mean, I think that, to use that dreadful word, mission, I think mission has been overly monological. You sit there and listen to us. We've got the message, you haven't. We're in the light, you're in the dark. We're God's people, you're not. I think that's all rubbish. I think that the picture is infinitely more complex than that, and that we must go into more of a dialogical connection with people. Mission needs to be more dialogical, connecting with people in a genuine conversation. And in a genuine conversation, both parties have to be open to receive something from the other. So yeah, I think that we've got things to say to people out there in the world, but I think they've got things to say to us. And if there is redemption for the church, I don't think it all comes from within the church, not at all. I think it will come from outside of the church. So anyway, this is where I'm at. Next time, I will go on to talk about some of the other struggles that I've had and still have with things in the Church of England, and the mainstream church, with things like ordination, with clericalism in the church. People have been asking me about infant baptism, and how I make sense of that theologically, and other things too. So join me, and do send me your thoughts and your questions too, and I'd be glad to raise them as well. We may struggle with the church and with churchy things, but I'm not prepared personally to just hand it all over to what I think at times are the crazies, to a mean-spirited religion that isn't the God that I believe in. I'm not prepared to do that, not yet anyway. So this is a prayer which you may have read in my OMG book, and if you haven't, well, get a copy. But this is a prayer called Religion, God? Really? Honestly, God, I sometimes wonder why you permit yourself to be associated with religion. It's not just the revelations of abuse, sexual exploitation, and the like. Goodness knows there is that. It's the way that you are routinely presented in religion without any apparent doubt or second thought. For example, as all powerful being and at the same time all loving and all good, yet mysteriously unwilling to exercise some of your loving almightiness in a world of insufferable pain and horror. You must sometimes feel thankful for atheists. At least they use some of the rigour and rationality that you gave us, even if arriving at different conclusions to someone like me. Many of my best friends are atheists, honest people and well informed, who think intelligently about faith and also live compassionately in the world, yet cannot bear muddle-headed talk of a God who makes no sense. I imagine you must recognise many non-believers as your servants. I'm pretty sure you do. But on the other hand, it is religion that brought me to know you, to ask these questions, to grope falteringly toward a faith I can believe in. I'm grateful too for many faithful religious companions of all faiths who help to guide me in the way. And I relish the vast body of discourse which religion opens up, and the practices and rituals that daily refresh the soul. Oh my God, it is confusing. I'm glad I don't have to sort it all out. I'll leave that to you. I just need to keep focused on what matters, attending to my soul, be unafraid to doubt and question, but also to believe, to relish life for all it's worth, practice kindness, stay alert to wonder. Religion, God? Well, maybe. Okay, well, if you have a drink handy, and I still have a cup of tea, which is just about warm, I invite you to join me in a toast, a little ritual of a toast. I want to propose a toast to generous religion, to a generous, gracious God, a toast to inclusive faith, to an inclusive God, a toast to life, L'chaim. It is cold, but hey. So, thank you for being with me here today, guys. If you like what I'm doing, you can support us. You can buy us a coffee. You just need to follow the link, which is on your screen now. And, you can buy us a coffee or two, whatever. And we're very deeply grateful to all of you who do this, to some of you who have elected for it just to happen month by month. That is so kind of you. And we're grateful for all the encouragement that we receive in so many different forms. So thank you very much. Now, just one thing to say before I leave you is that tomorrow morning, that is Monday morning, depends when you're listening to this, on Monday morning, I'm doing a Pause for Thought on Radio 2 on the Zoe Ball Show. It's around about 7:15, 7:20, and I relish doing this, speaking to millions of people for just a little short period of time. It's just a bite-sized thing. But, it's so fantastic when you get feedback from people who often begin their communication by saying, I'm not really religious, but. And I think there's a lot of that out there, a lot of people who are not really religious, but their hearts are open and they do explore in all kinds of ways. So if you can join me for Pause for Thought, it'll be, I'll put a link up for it, but it'll be on BBC Sounds afterwards. And that's just about it, really. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll carry on telling you some more tales next week, tales of a bad Christian vicar. And as I say, do send in any thoughts or questions that you have. Meanwhile, have a great week. Be kind to the world around you. Be kind to the world itself. Be kind to yourself. Stay human, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.